Hello, Professor. In front of you, I have an outline for my reflection video, as well as I'm sure I'm going to be providing one to you to follow along with in case for some reason this is not in frame or is blurry. I do want to start by saying that I'm not used to only speaking to you in this case, as throughout the entire semester it seems like it's been both you as well as my peers that I've been talking to here. So I really do hope that my reflection captures that same depth and connection that we've built throughout the entire semester. My goal is to really express not only what I've learned, but also how it's reshaped my perspective and purpose. I do want to begin just by thanking you for everything this entire semester, for putting up with any of my quirks, answering any of my questions, as well as providing me with a plethora of wisdom and insight as we've dived deep into this course. Deep. My retainers are getting to me today. The course has been a really transformative journey for me. When I first started, I really did believe that I had a foundational understanding of equity and diversity in education. More specifically, I took a class in community college in upstate New York called Cultural Diversity that seemed to match up really well, syllabus to syllabus. However, as we progressed here, I quickly realized that there was so much more to uncover and internalize. So no surprise here, I learned a little bit. So today I want to reflect on some key moments of growth for me, some discoveries that challenged and inspired me, as well as, if I plan on the long term, how I'm going to apply the lessons moving forward. Two questions are really going to guide this entire reflection. Starting off with, how have my experiences in this course reshaped my understanding of equity, diversity, and justice in education? I don't know why that's still there. As well as, how can I use what I've learned to create meaningful, systemic change in education? So, let's explore these. Starting off with personal growth. When I entered the course, as I mentioned before, I had a surface or baseline level understanding of equity and diversity. I feel like I knew the terminology and some of the concepts, but I couldn't recall if I've ever had a significant or deep engagement with how they really applied to my own identity or my work. Early on, I realized that vulnerability and self-reflection are essential for meaningful growth in these areas. One seriously pivotal moment for me was writing my social identity story. Reflecting on being white, adopted, and a youth advocate really pushed me to confront how privilege has influenced my experiences. I also was able to recall your feedback from this specific assignment. And you really did end up challenging me to dig deeper, questioning why I hesitated to name a few certain aspects of my identity. The exercise taught me that acknowledging privilege isn't just about self-awareness. It's really about accountability and becoming a better advocate for others. Another defining experience, as I'm sure I could sound like a broken record here with, is about that IEP meeting with Mateo, a student whom I have worked with. Just to sort of refresh our memories a little bit here, I was at an IEP session with him, supporting him with his mother as well as his BCBA. And the professionals at his school doubted his abilities. One of the main things was the claims that he couldn't recite more than 2 letters of the alphabet, and they were never in any specific order. At that time, running the after-school programs, I worked on that skill with him daily, and I knew that he was absolutely capable of providing all 26. So when he confidently recited the entire alphabet in front of everyone, it wasn't just a victory for him, it really vindicated my belief in him, and it was honestly a victory for everybody who believed in his potential. That moment really solidified my role as an advocate and reminded me of the transformative power of seeing and nurturing abilities that others often overlook. I think I ended up in one of the assignments writing about how people usually just look at the dis in disability and forget that there's a second half to that word and ignore that second half. So I really wanted to put emphasis on the ability over dis. Looking back now, those moments weren't just personal milestones. They really did clarify how deeply interconnected my journey is with the broader mission of equity and justice in education. Growth isn't just about acquiring knowledge. It's about taking action. Stepping into those uncomfortable spaces and pushing for systemic change. Moving on from that, I have some moments of discovery and collaboration that I wanted to talk on a little bit. Module 2 in specific introduced me to critical social justice education. And one quote that really stood out to me early on was directly from the book, which is, knowledge is always culturally informed. This challenged me to think critically about whose voices are centered in education and how power dynamics shape what we accept as truth. Some of our group discussions during the module were absolutely impactful. I got to listen to my classmates' perspectives, which expanded on my own understanding, honestly helping me reflect on my own biases in a more profound way. Moving on from that, Module 5, we examined how subtle stereotypes perpetuate harmful narratives. Another example was the one of the Tide ad featuring Simone Biles, which highlighted how media can reinforce stereotypes in ways that often go unnoticed. This really tied into a broader discussion about shielding children from complex realities. While well-intentioned, such shielding can hinder their ability to develop critical thinking skills. These insights deepened my understandings of the role education plays in preparing students to navigate the challenges of the world instead of avoiding them. Then from there, the group discussion on the 13th and Parkland Rising tied so many of these themes together. In specific, give some kudos to some of my group members here. Ari's observation about schools in low-income areas functioning as extensions of the justice system was extremely eye-opening. Sadie had some reflections on zero-tolerance policies, which mirrored the systemic oppression highlighted in the 13th. And, sorry if I butcher this, Rusora's comments on reactive versus proactive activism emphasized persistent frustration in addressing systemic issues. These discussions also reinforce the idea that education is both a reflection of, as well as a tool to challenge social inequities. Going from there, collaboration throughout this course reminded me of the power of shared voices. I get to hear my peers' insights, which didn't just add depth to my learning, honestly gave me hope, if that's not too cheesy to say. Change often starts with honest conversations and a collective commitment to do better. And I really feel like that safe space that we created in that group aided in giving me that hope. From there, redesigning the workshop. I want to talk a little bit about my final project. I ended up writing a letter to my future self, which really just was me envisioning classrooms that prioritize equity. My original workshop idea focused on implicit bias, restorative justice, and inclusion. It had a strong foundation, but I've since reimagined it just because I didn't feel like I went into a lot of depth there. My focus was really on that creative future me letter aspect. So from here, I reimagined it with more actionable and detailed components to really enhance its impact. So if I were to redesign this workshop, I would start off with the pre-workshop assessment. In this case, the participants, which were teachers and educators, would complete surveys, which would gauge their baseline understanding of bias and inclusion. From there, we'd have some interactive activities. More specifically, I did believe I mentioned this already, but role-playing scenarios and implicit bias journaling would probably help educators reflect on their assumptions and maybe practice some more restorative techniques. From there, got some breakout groups. So smaller groups will work on redesigning lesson plans, as well as addressing biased disciplinary practices. Practical toolkit. Participants would leave with templates for restorative circles, inclusive reading list, and example lesson plans. And finally, case studies. Real world success stories would provide inspiration and concrete strategies for implementation. Additionally, I would probably include a follow-up component. I feel like this was probably something that I should have mentioned in my original project. A few months or so after the workshop, those educators would reconvene to share progress, challenges, and successes. really having an issue today. This would foster accountability and create a community of continuous improvement. I think these changes would make the workshop more actionable and reflect my commitment to fostering systemic change. By equipping these educators, these imaginary educators, with the tools that they need, we could probably create classrooms where equity is not just an ideal, but a daily practice. With that said, my final points. The course has really reshaped my understanding of equity, diversity, and justice. Vulnerability, collaboration, and self reflection have really been at the heart of my growth here throughout this semester. I've learned that education is so much more than just academics. It's about empowering students and educators alike to think critically, to advocate more for themselves, and to also challenge the systems that fail them. So to not be afraid to speak up, even if it seems like it's an impossible hurdle. So going forward, I'm seriously committed to creating inclusive classrooms that nurture every student's potential. Education is really a powerful tool for systemic change, and I'm beyond excited to really use what I've learned here to make a difference. I'm definitely going to carry these lessons with me, not just as an educator, but as someone who deeply believes in the power of people to drive some sort of meaningful change, however that may be. And with that said, thank you.